What's going on, everybody? This is Myron and my friend Jennifer Benton. Her nickname is JB on Church Next. If this is your first time, I want to say welcome, welcome, welcome. Hey, we are into one thing here, and it's 100x impact. And at the Church Next show, one thing that's very important to us is healthy church growth. We've seen unhealthy church growth and where that goes and where that leads. And not only healthy church growth, but also healthy reproduction. We believe that if you are growing, you should be reproducing. So I want my friend JB to say what's up to the audience, and then I'll introduce my friend who we're having today.
Hey everybody, good afternoon. It's your girl JB. I'm glad to be here, and I'm excited about this conversation with Casey. I think it's going to be fire. You know, we've been coming with the fire for the last couple of weeks, so I think today is just going to fall right in line with where we've been.
It's really been fire because last week and this week, we're really talking about, number one, the big picture is innovative leadership. I don't know about you, but leadership in these times require innovation. And we've had some amazing people talk and have conversation in this series, right? But specifically, this is part 2 of Pastoring in the Pandemic. And we have my friend, Casey Comstock from Omaha, Nebraska, super dope leader, leads Crossover Church. And I'm so glad you're here, bro. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. Excited for today.
Yeah, man. I can remember your journey a little bit, meeting you a couple of years ago, man, and all that God's doing. And you know, somebody asked a question a couple of days ago about the ramifications of COVID, right? And race and politics and the impact it's had on the church. And it helped me realize that having these conversations with leaders like you, bro, like helps us navigate how we move forward as leaders. And so you're located here in Omaha, but tell us a little bit about just who you are, your credit card information, if you want to share that with me for later. And just any other information about your journey, man. Talk to us.
Blood type and all, you want it all, huh? No.
Yeah, give it to me, man.
First and foremost, I'm kind of disappointed. I did not get the memo to have this sweet backdrop. So thanks a lot for that, Myron. Thanks for setting me up. But once again, just super excited to have this conversation. I'm excited mostly because it's with Myron. Before I even get into my background, I just want to thank you, Myron. You paved the way. When I moved to Omaha 5 years ago, you were one of the first pastors I sought out, and you opened up not just like your knowledge of church planning, but you open up your home and your life to me. So I remember our first conversation was actually in your living room. So I just appreciate you and how you've led these conversations when it comes to racism, church planning, and all these things, man. I'm just thankful for you and your life and what you're doing.
Thank you, Brent. I appreciate that, bro.
Yeah. So a little bit about me. I'm kind of bummed. I was hoping you guys' partner in crime was here because she's from England. I'm from Scotland, actually. You probably didn't know that.
What?
Scotland, South Dakota, though. It's way different than England, but small town, man. Like, so small town, I think when I grew up, there was like 900 people, if that. I graduated with a class of 30 people. So, but I grew up going to church, like United Church of Christ, Reformed Church. And one thing I'm thankful for my mom was, and my grandparents actually, they made it a priority. Like, we went to church on Sunday, but as I got older, became a Christmas, Easter churchgoer. If that, I was more concerned about sports. In small town, you did them all, right? You went from football to basketball to track to baseball. Like, basically, if you could chew gum and walk, you're on the team. So I had a good in there. But so chasing girls, playing sports, that's what I did in high school. And as I got to college, it became worse. But all of a sudden, I moved up to Sioux Falls and started working at Wells Fargo. I have a degree in business finance. And someone randomly mentioned this church called Celebrate. So this church called Celebrate Church up in Sioux Falls. And I walked in those doors, and there were people there that had something that I did not have. They had this joy about them. They had, like I said, something that I actually desired, but I didn't know what it was. And so I went, me and my fiance then, wife now, Amanda, went, and we just kept going back and kept going back. And all of a sudden, man, it was just game changer. Like, I experienced the love of Christ. I gave my life to him, got baptized, and I just started taking these steps, these small steps of obedience. Like, so from getting baptized, I joined they call them life groups. I started serving in kids ministry, started leading a life group. started leading in kids ministry. They asked me to leave my job at Wells Fargo to go on staff full time to work at it. I thought they were crazy. I'm like, I asked, like, are you guys sure you know what you're doing? Like, did everybody else say no? And I was like the bottom of the poll here that you wanted to have here, but just kept saying yes, and God kept providing opportunities for me to lead and grow. And so I did kids ministry for a couple of years at Celebrate in Sioux Falls. Did some young adult ministry as well. During that time, started going for a master's at Wesley Seminary. Got a master's in arts and in ministry, and then I became a campus pastor. So Celebrate at the time was is a larger church, probably 4,000 people. We were doing a lot of multi-site, and I became the campus pastor for our main site. Once again, I thought they were crazy for giving me that opportunity. I'm like, and God knows what He's doing, because I assure you He's making the right decision here. And so I did that, and never if someone had told me 10 years ago, Casey, you're gonna be in working for a church and becoming a pastor, I would have laughed at them and told them to get out of here, because that's just not where my life was at. But it's been an amazing journey. God's been just so graceful and grateful. I'm so grateful for what He's been doing and allowing me to be a part of the lives we've been able to see, and lives that have been changing. And then, so the crazy thing that happened was when our lead pastor, Keith Lloyd, came back from sabbatical, and he said, we're going to start planting churches. At that point in time, I had no idea that was even a thing. Like, you do what? Like, I just thought churches kind of, they were just there and they existed. Never really heard of it before, but it's something in me. Like, looking back through my life, like, I'm wired that way. Like, starting new things, want to be a part of new things, start going to do different things. Start my career at Wells Fargo, and just even my career at the, call it career, but my time at Celebrate was always like going to do something new and different and being a part of that and starting something new and different. So that's a piece of, before you get to the church plan, but like, I'm just grateful because of Celebrate, because of Pastor Keith Lloyd. He saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And so I'm thankful for guys like him, guys like you, Pastor Reed up in Sioux Falls as well. And then, so that kind of started us on this journey of church planning after he came back from that sabbatical.
Wow, that's a pretty big story, especially, you know, that part where you're talking about you really didn't see yourself being this pastor. And so I'm interested, and we're going to tie this into question number 2, but at what point did you start really believing what other people were seeing about you as far as ministry was concerned? And then tell us a little more about your church planning journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember it's probably like 4 years ago when people would say Pastor Casey, I would cringe. I'm like, no, like, just call me Casey. I'm not Pastor Casey. That like, it was just weird, because once again, like, who would have thought? Like, I definitely think that. But then once I start, like, obviously more people start seeing that, speaking that to me as I started my journey, like through ordination, becoming licensed, stuff like that. I was like, okay, God has called me into this, and I need to own this. And I think that's been the pivotal thing. Once we moved from Sioux Falls to Omaha, I was like, okay, this is my journey, and so really started owning that piece of it. But like I said, when Pastor Keith came back, he grabbed, I want to say about 12 or 16 of us in a room and said, hey, we're going to plant a church. We want to plant churches, and we believe God's calling you guys to plant churches. So once again, he saw something in these people. He saw something in me that I didn't see myself. So he was so good at those I see in you conversations. And once and man, like, I've been standing on his shoulders for so long, and I'm so thankful for him. But once he started saying it, I trust him, and like, okay, there's something here. And God started working on my heart. And it's funny because 5 years ago, I'm sitting at my kitchen table, reading in John. I'm reading out of this NIV Bible, the Bible I got confirmed back in Scotland, South Dakota. I start reading in John 5:24, and where it says, very truly I tell you, whoever hears my word and believes believes him who sent me has eternal life and will not be judged, but has crossed over from death to life. And so as I'm reading that, John 5:24, I'm like, I couldn't get crossover out of my mind. I had no idea 5 years ago what that meant. But then as soon as Pastor Keith comes back and said, we're going to plant churches, I was like, okay, holy buckets, is this crossover church? And so God was started formulating this church in my mind, in my heart. And so we went through the assessment process. I tell people that's like getting naked in front of a stranger for three days almost. And it's really like, I think sometimes people like have a negative feeling about assessments, but it's really just help you like, what behaviors have you been a part of? What things have you done? We believe that past behaviors really help indicate future successes and help you even see blind spots that you might have in your life that you would never know otherwise. So we went through an assessment and we got a green light. But the thing was, we had no idea where God was calling us. And it's kind of funny because I would go anywhere and like I'd do anything and go anywhere. If God called us to it. My wife, on the other hand, so her name is Amanda. So I didn't even tell you about my family, but been married going on 10 years now, got an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old. At the time we had our son, Cohen, and Amanda was hesitant because we had no reason to leave. We had no reason to leave Sioux Falls. I had a full-time ministry job. Our first home was there. We've lived in Sioux Falls for now going on 5 years. And, but we knew that God was calling us to something different. And so we started praying about it. We started having conversations. But once again, we didn't know where. All of a sudden, Pastor Monty, who was a campus pastor at Celebrate as well, started feeling this call to go to Omaha to plant Meadows Church. And as soon as my wife said yes to that, I knew, okay, we have to go. Because once again, we had no reason to leave. I'd end up going back into the workplace and in the financial world. And I'm still actually in that role right now. But so when Amanda said yes, I'm like, okay, let's go do this. And we spent about 3 years with Monty and Meadows. And for me, it was just really like, okay, if God's calling me to this, why wouldn't I help someone else plant a church so I can learn from them? And I kid with people all the time. Like I tell people, I have a bachelor's degree in what not to do because of Monty. Like I learned all the things that I don't want to do, but I also have an amazing degree in what to do because he's done some amazing things in the Bellevue Papillion area. So I'm so thankful for him as well. So I spent time at Meadows. I helped start a kids ministry, helped lead our youth ministry there. I was a service pastor there. So I think that time for me was really a time just to humble myself and like, can I truly serve someone else, knowing that I saw myself in the lead pastor role. And so it was a very humbling moment because there's like Monty's making decisions that I wouldn't make, but it's okay because it's his church. Am I willing to serve him no matter what and be there until God said it's time to go? So a very humbling moment. Like I said, but thankful for Monty, thankful for every opportunity he's given me. And then, so we're in Omaha and we didn't know quite yet where to go. But during this time, I'm like full into exponential material, the exponential conference in Orlando, whatever I can learn about church planning, I was all in. But I needed this 5-year journey because I think if I would have started Crossover 5 years ago, it would have been just a copycat of what Celebrate was. And what they're doing is great for what they're called to do. But I was called to do a different work, and Crossover is going to be different than what they do in Sioux Falls. So it's been an amazing journey. Been not the easiest journey either, a very humbling journey, but it's been quite the process for sure.
Casey, you said multiple times in this conversation already that God had called you to do something different. And one of the things in our conversations that I liked about you already was that you stayed in the marketplace. So already there's a difference in this new third generation church, because this is actually a third generation church. You got Celebrate Church, you have Meadows, and now you have Crossover. And so talk to Janet, JB, and I like calling her JB. Talk to JB and I about like, because I hear people all the time, especially the younger they are, the younger leaders, I'm gonna go do something better. I'm gonna go do something different, and I'm gonna go this and it's kind of like pride, actually. You know what I mean? To think that 2,000 years later you're gonna do something different or something better. But I feel like you have a different posture about you, and I would say that posture that I've noticed about you has been like how humble you are. You're probably one of the most humble leaders I've met, at least in Omaha, or people that I've met. But there's nothing overtly wrong with saying we're going to go do something different. And I see the different that God's doing already in you guys. But for our viewers, for people who are going to catch this on the replay, talk to us about the difference from the first gen church, the second gen church, and now crossover church?
Yeah, first, I think I'll touch on just the co-vocational piece of it. I think even, as we're going through the process after assessment, and as I was like, some of the things that really resonated with me as, just reading through Acts and the Apostle Paul, and really understanding like the change from bivocational to co-vocational, making it okay, like to be that. And I think it was really like, there's a reason I think that I went through college at the University of South Dakota, got a business degree in finance. There's a reason why I worked at Wells Fargo, and I've been in these spaces for a reason and purpose. I can use my past to help other people find their purpose, and even the workplace. And so I think the best conversation was with you. The first time I met back in your living room was I was just talking, hey, I believe God's calling me to this. I don't think other people believe in this. Other people want me to go full time. And is this okay? And you're like, well, the best part was that you asked these couple questions. Well, are they paying you? I'm like, well, yeah. Are they paying you well? I'm like, well, yeah. You have benefits? Well, yeah. Like, then why would you leave? Like, why? And like, just like, seriously, like, and for me, it's I had to check my heart a lot. I had to pray through it. Like, is this me? Like, is it fear, or is it like, why do I feel this way? I just resonate with the Apostle Paul, like with this tent making. I never asked anything for you from you. I'm giving my time for this as well. And I also like, I truly believe like we want to be a ascending church as well. I believe one of the ways I can do that is to use my marketplace gifts and talents and my work experience to free up budget space for a future church planter. If I can take that budget line out, why wouldn't I? And so I just view it as a way to be a good steward of what God's given me, and then also to help the church out long term as we look at sending out people as well. So with that, so co-vocational for me, it means we have to simplify things. We don't like, and this is not bad, like, I hope no one hears this is bad. It's like, we just simplified Sunday. Like, we don't want to be putting in a ton of time, because obviously I can't, and we have people that can't either. No one's paid at our church. It's all co-vocational people, and we have some amazing leaders that want to put in a ton of time. And I'm so thankful for the team that we have. But that means we don't spend a bunch of time on all the fun stuff and all the things that maybe attract people to, like, if you're coming for a big show, we're not going to do that just because we don't want to. And it's
I'm just like, you're saying so much here that I want to pause because I think that's going to help inform this next question about COVID. I asked you what was different, and you said, well, when we had that conversation about, are they paying you? Do you have benefits? Like, why would you? And little did we know that COVID was on the way. Mm-hmm. Little do we know that Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, who was going to win the presidency, like all that was coming, and we didn't know that. And so for you to say, you know what, I'm going to keep my job. It's like anybody in their right mind, if you got a family, obviously God does things that are different, but for us to shift in our thinking from like, we have to be somewhat like full-time in ministry, where it's like ministries everywhere we go. And then secondly, you're like, well, we want to be ascending church. Right. I think, it's, I don't know, 90% of churches aren't reproducing in America, right? Which means everybody is after attractional growth. And then the third thing you said, I think is very, very important, is simplifying our Sunday. And so with all of that, like at the helm and all these things that you're learning, COVID hits and it just changes everything. And now you're having to lead and pastor and navigate in the pandemic. So like, how did that affect your journey? How did it influence your journey? What happened? Unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were actually 2020, I think in March, Monty said, hey, you're going to I think it was actually in January, I preached the message and said, hey, cast vision about the church. One of the things that I just believe God was asking me to do as well was I wasn't going to personally ask anybody unless like God said, hey, ask this person. And so I only asked one person to come with me from Meadows his name is Michael. We spent a lot of time together, one-on-one discipleship type stuff. So he was the one person like I felt okay asking him to come with me. Everybody else, if I was allowed to cast vision from the stage, if anybody said yes to come with me, great. Otherwise, I wasn't going to ask anybody to come. And so we actually, when I did that, we had about 16 families that said, hey, yes, we want to be a part of it. We had our first like interest gathering at maybe a month or so after that. And then COVID happens. And so here we are, supposed to be launching in fall of 2020. We had amazing plans, right? All these events leading up to this gathering. And one of the main things that I was telling the team that we're saying yes was, we want to be a church that it's birthed out of disciple making. And that's how we want the church to grow and how it to actually come about. And so COVID, like oddly enough, COVID like solidified that in my heart and the team's heart as well. Like, okay, what happens when Sunday's gone? What happens when we can't gather in a building anymore? Thankful we have these, we call them our core groups, the groups of 3 to 5, where we really spend a bunch of time in the Word daily. We meet weekly, hold each other accountable, and pray for the lost and pray for who we can disciple next. And so that's what we did for a good year. As you know, as we were leading up to the fall of 2020, we had a building actually, and it was about a month before we were going to launch. We were still going to go with it. Like, hey, you know what? We have no idea what's going to happen, but we're still going to start if we can. That door closed. And so the place we're going to meet at came back and say, unfortunately, we can't meet, which made sense. Like 100% agree with that decision. And so that changed that. And so we, as a core group, we just met weekly and we're just praying, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? What does it mean to be a part of a team that launches a church? And we did a lot of different things of like, okay, God, what are you calling us to do? So we tried to run through doors. A lot of them shut. Like, talk to Jeff Reed about like the digital church. Like, do we launch digitally and then maybe launch physically later on? That door closed. That didn't happen. So like we were pursuing all these things. Okay, God, we have no idea what you're asking us to do in this season. But the one thing we know was, hey, we're just going to continue to make disciples and make disciples. And that the biggest, I would say, thing that was disrupted was finding a place to gather on a Sunday. And so we kept getting no after no after no. Nobody's responding to us. It wasn't until we then decided, hey, we're going to launch 2021, fall of 2021, September was around the time. And we started doing these, gatherings. We felt safe. We started meeting in parks, just getting the word out. But it's hard to cast vision to a future launch date if you don't have a place to meet. We're talking about the Sunday gathering here. We're still, doing our core groups and disciple making. It wasn't until the end of August when the school finally said, yes, hey, we'd love to have you meet in their school. And so we ended up pushing back our launch date to October, and we had our first actual public gathering on a Sunday on October 17th. So, but I think during that COVID season, it really, for me, is like, the Sunday gathering is going to happen, but we wanted to focus on disciple making, and that's been birthed out of it. And I think for me, the coolest moment was this last Sunday. We had our first baptism. So we had 5 people get baptized. One of our core leader, our worship leader, she's amazing. And she's like, Casey, this is the first time I was able to disciple someone and baptize them. And so that statement right there was like, even if the church closes next week, like, man, what just happened? Disciples being made, they're being baptized, and they're going to go make disciples themselves.
Wow. Go ahead, Jen.
No, I'm just kind of, just taking it all in because, we heard so many reports about churches actually closing down during the pandemic and pastors giving up, even pastors committing suicide during the pandemic. And so I really want to know, like, what were some of the challenges that you faced as a pastor during the pandemic trying to launch this new ministry, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge was changing the way people thought about the church and what the church was about. And I go back to the disciple making. I even had to change it for myself. This story, like it kills me, but I'm so thankful that it happened because it just changed the way that disciple making can happen. It's probably about a good year and a half ago where I had 2 guys that I know really well. that God put on my heart. Like, hey, I want to see if these guys would be willing to just meet weekly, get in the word daily. But like, well, they don't live by me. Like, they don't live in Omaha. They're both back in South Dakota. So I stopped. Like, okay, I'm not going to pursue this anymore. Lo and behold, they go through some tough times. I still go back around about 6 months later, and we unfortunately those tough times had them go through rehab, and all this stuff happened. But I circle back around and ask, hey, would you guys be willing to go through this with me and do it over Zoom? And so they said yes. We're still meeting weekly. We're still in the Word daily together. But I think back to that, like if only I would have said yes, if I only would have reached out to them a year and a half ago, would have prevented some of the things they went through from happening. And so I even had to change the way I thought about things, how ministry can happen and could happen virtually. So if it has happened with me, like how much more does that have to happen with the people I'm leading, people I'm starting the church with? And so I think the biggest challenge was helping people see that like church isn't just the Sunday gathering. It's more than that. Church isn't just what we do in that hour, but it's what we do outside the walls Monday through Saturday as well. And it's not just about the people in it's about our neighborhood for sure, but what about our bigger reach as well? And if God calls you to something, like don't say no to it. Open those doors and keep those doors open. Don't close them. So that was a big thing. A big challenge was changing mindsets. I think another big challenge, it was interesting. Just the thought of church planting as a whole. There are a couple other churches that were launching in the same area. There's not many where we're at. But as soon as the other churches are launching, well, it's the question of why are we launching then? Like, well, they're launching. They've been in the area for a while. It's a well-known church. And so just that challenge alone of just, okay, yeah, we're in this together. We're kingdom builders, and we need more church. We need a new church on every block if we want to reach everybody. So just helping people understand that too. Like, there's a reason why we're launching. God's calling us to this because there's people that we're going to reach that they're not going to be able to reach.
You know, Jennifer, I'd like you to speak to this because when COVID hit, your name kind of started ringing across the country a little bit as the digital queen. Like as Casey is talking about going digital and, you know, like discipling and using Zoom, does any of what he's saying like resonate? And had you heard like similar things across the country about COVID and then how, Jennifer, did you position yourself to like help church planters in the pandemic? I think that's very, very important for our audience to hear.
You know, in 2019, I did a conference called the Social Church Conference with Ryan Wakefield and those guys at Church Marketing University. And I talked about live streaming, and I gave live streaming strategies about being friendly online and welcoming people and expanding your worship service to be online. And I remember when the pandemic happened, when it first started, Ryan called me and he said, you know what? If people would have listened to you in 2019, they'd be prepared. They wouldn't be scrambling right now. And, you know, growing up in a ministry family and having that prophetic presence in my life. Sometimes, you know, we look at our elders like, oh, they're perfect. They hear God, but we don't think we hear God. And so when Ryan said that to me, I was like, well, God, you know, you were probably speaking and I just wasn't perceiving. I'm just being technical, but you really were saying something to us that we did not catch on to. And so as the pandemic was happening, when it first started, of course, there was a big panic of, oh my God, you know, how are we going to keep our churches afloat? But just the simplicity of get on Zoom, like Pastor Casey was talking about, you know, connect with people on there. I think people have made church so super, super sacred that they thought technology would take away from the sacredness of it. And it's not. The sacredness is the relationship with God, the relationship with people. It's not about the church building itself. And so getting people to shift their mindsets to say, you know what, God does not need your pulpit to move. He can move through a telephone. He can move through the internet connection. You know, most of us have watched Benny Hinn, TBN, Rod Parsley, and all those guys on TV and have felt the anointing come through the airwaves. So why can't it be for all of us? Why does it have to be just a special few? So like Casey said, shifting that mindset to get people to actually embrace the technology was a big thing. And, you know, just really, for me in the pandemic, it was really that, okay, God, I too have to trust you, because not only did you let me have this experience and this knowledge working with New Birth and them being innovative and doing live stream since 2012, you know, experiencing that, but you let me have that experience so that I could be someone that can lead and guide through this time and still keep people connected, still keep churches growing and thriving, even when the world is shut down. And so as the director of marketing and communications at my church at Mount Hermon, we not only saw our membership maintain, but we grew. So when I talk to other pastors, I'm like, you know, because they feel like, oh, live stream's the devil. No, it's a matter of how you use it and how you're connecting with people. And if you're not connecting, maybe this is a time to reevaluate your presentation, reevaluate your message, your methods, all of that. And so I think for in regards to digital technology, the pastors that were willing to embrace it and that were willing to stretch themselves, even those are the ones that are still going, and those are the ones that are still, you know, thriving.
That's fantastic. And like, that's how we met, Jen. That's how we actually met. And you're right on. And I think it brings up another question in my mind, Casey, about even something you said is like, when everything shut down and no one can go anywhere, all of a sudden, everyone's paradigm on what church was completely disrupted, where we thought church was where you go. And it gave me an excellent opportunity to start saying this one line: church isn't a place you go to, it's a family that you belong to. And so one of the questions that just came up in my mind is like, how do you help your people? I think I might have been the first one to coin this, that, you know, we're raising up a generation of pastors who aren't pastors, but they're actually event planners. And so how do you keep your church from like becoming an event planning business where people show up somewhere to consume versus to contribute and be commissioned into what God's called them to be as the local church via Crossover Church? How you do that, man?
Yeah, that's great. Because I think, man, if someone told me, Casey, hey, for the next 20 years, your sole purpose with the church is to plan an amazing Sunday gathering, I don't know, I'm tapping out. Like, that's not me. That's not what I'm wired and called to do. So I think a big thing of it is living out myself. Like, is Sunday the only thing that I do? Or am I actually practicing what I'm preaching about? Am I actually doing the things I'm asking my people to do? So am I in a discipleship group? Am I inviting people into my home? Am I doing those things outside the Sunday gathering that I believe matter? If I'm not doing it, then why would anybody else do it? So I think first and foremost, just living it out and modeling it as much as possible. But I think too, I've tried to do my best and just helping people understand their giftings, their callings, helping them live sent. I think a big piece of that is redefining what church can be. Like, we have three people believe they're called to plant a church, start their own church. And so now it's like identifying, okay, you know, where, what, when, and like what type of church, house church, micro church. I think there's different, like, and helping people understand like these different expressions aren't bad. They're good. Like, they're really good. And helping them realize that they don't have to be the Saddleback churches. They don't have to be the Elevation church. Like,
Right.
those are great churches and we need those, but we
Right.
also need these other churches and other spaces. And so I think for me is giving people the freedom and giving people the okay and the permission to do what God's called them to do, and giving them the space to do that as well. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it helps take the pressure off of starting new churches that look just like crossover, but instead it's like, okay, what if God's calling you to do something in your backyard right now?
I'm so glad you're saying this, because I think it's easy to get into franchise mode, and what I'm hearing you talk about is so kingdom. It's like you're not into building a brand, you're into help like launch, commission, send people into their prophetic destiny, man. And I think that takes innovation. And I think sometimes we put innovation on a pedestal, and we don't simplify what innovation is. And I love what many of our guests have already said on this show. I heard one guy say, innovation is the ability to listen to the Spirit of God. And I just thought, wow, and as you look at the innovation as a concept, oftentimes innovative ideas occur when what my friend Jay Moon calls the adjacent possible. It's when two opposing, perspectives come together to dialogue and ultimately gives birth to something new and innovative. And so when you think about Crossover Church, what adjacent possible experiences, conversations have you had that you've innovated as a leader, as a husband, as a dad, as a church planter? Like, what does innovation look like for you? How have you had to innovate?
Yeah, that's great. And I think you're right. Like, I think a lot of times we think of innovation, we think like bigger, better, newer technology. Like that's what we should go to. I think for us and for me, innovation has actually been looking back so that we can move forward. Right now we're taking a church through the book of Acts and just looking back, not to copy what they did, but just to learn what motivated them, why they did what they did. But then for me, I'm in the Wesleyan tribe. I think, Myron, you're like a closet Wesleyan, aren't you? I think. But I'm.
Don't be telling nobody, man.
Secret
Don't be
safe
telling
with me.
nobody.
But I look back at John Wesley, a role model. Like I look back how he innovated and changed the church, and what he did was he created spaces for people. Right, he had his bands for people, the smaller groups, 3 to 5. He had his classes, which probably like a life group or a small group, what we have today, but he also had societies. So he innovated in such a way, he took it away from just a Sunday gathering, innovated and created spaces for several people to be involved and engage with. I believe we should be engaged in all 3 of those spaces, but at least created these entryways for people to be engaged with. Someone that may never come in to a Sunday gathering, people that may never come to Crossover, might come to someone's community group, is what we call our classes, our small groups. Someone might come to your home and never show up on a Sunday at Crossover. Someone might join your core group, which is the band, what Wesley would call it, or the discipleship group, but never set foot into the other spaces. So for us at Crossover, how we innovated is created these spaces for people to engage with Christ, engage in asking questions, discover faith, discover what God's called them, their purpose. And we're okay with people being in those other spaces that have never may never show up at Crossover. Like, so we've let them go of that. Like we definitely taken the Home Depot model of you do, we'll help you. Like we want to create the space for people to use their home as ministry, to create those community groups, those core groups, even if it's not branded Crossover. And so I think us innovating has been creating those spaces for people to engage with people, to build relationships with Christ and with each other. And then just from there, like having them create their own. Obviously there's some, like we help as much as we can, we support, we provide a framework, but it's giving them the freedom to do ministry in their neighborhoods when we probably wouldn't be welcome in the neighborhood as the church, but they're already there. And so that's probably the biggest thing that's changed in my life over the last 10 years. I think that's why I needed this process of shifting my mindset and what I knew into what could actually be, I think, what really looks like kingdom work and what kingdom would look like.
That's so good. Um, so my question now is, what advice would you have for someone who is sensing a call to a new work?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like if you are experiencing God call you to do a new work, whatever it may be, church planter, missionary, children's path, like any type of new work, like I think whatever it is, surround yourself with people that love you and care for you and speak truth to you. I've shared this. I've been able to stand on people's shoulders for a long time. I would not be here today if it wasn't for people in my life. Go back to Pastor Keith, Pastor Reed, Pastor Monty, Pastor Myron, like people that care about you, pray for you, and really like people that will cheer you on. There's enough people that are there to discourage you and tell you what you're doing wrong. Find the people that will truly encourage you and celebrate you for what God's calling you to do and give you the freedom to be different. That's what I think, Myron, you've done. Like I look at what you've been doing at Mission up in Omaha, and you've given me permission to do things differently. And so I would just encourage, find people that have gone before you and steal their time because most of them are humble enough to give you their time. And so that'd be the first thing. And I think just trust the process would be a big thing. I would just encourage you. Like I've been on this journey. Like I think people might see crossover like, well, it didn't just pop up overnight. It's been a process. Like 5 years ago, I believe this call was on my life to plant a church, but I needed these 5 years to happen for it to be what God's called it to be. There are some things I had to work through, some things that God had to flesh out for me as well. But you just trust the process. He's good. He'll guide you. He'll lead you. He'll provide for you. Don't try to rush it. Like if we were to rush crossover, it would have probably just ended up like any other church. But I believe it does have God's stamp on how he wants it to look and the mark of him right now. So the last thing I would say is truly take the time to understand what God's calling you to. That involves taking time to understand how he's wired you, right? I tell my kids every day, hey, mom and dad love you. Who loves you more? Jesus loves you more. And you are God's masterpiece. So how has God made you? How has he wired you? I truly believe he'll use our past for our purpose. Our past doesn't disqualify us from our purpose. And so how has he led you through these different experiences that you've gone through? That's a big reason why I'm still in the financial industry, is like it's part of my past. And I believe there's a space here that ministry can happen. I don't think I'll be in this role where I'm at right now long term. I just doesn't have the flexibility I'm looking for, but I do believe for this season, I'm here for a reason and a purpose, and God will use that past to help me where I'm at today. So take the time to truly understand your past, understand your present, understand how he's made you, your gifts, your talents, and then help others do the same thing. Line yourself up with people that are like-minded, but also people that are willing to challenge you and push back a little bit as well. So a couple of things I would just say. I'd say another thing, just kind of along the lines, like surrounding yourself with people, find a tribe that you relate with that can support you, encourage you as well. Don't do this alone. We talk a lot about at Crossover DNA, stole that from Celebrate, but do nothing alone. I think the same is true if you're called to plant a church. Like, don't do it alone. There's people out there that want to support you, equip you, and train you. Utilize it. Don't think you have to go recreate the wheel when it's already been created.
Man, that's so powerful, Casey. I think, in American Christianity, it's easy to elevate those who can preach really well at the expense of people who are in the trenches being co-vocational. And sometimes, and I'm glad you made the shift because, like for you to be co-vocational, it says a lot about who you are as a leader. And I think about Jennifer, like she's serving in her church, but she's leading the ministry, she's leading a company, and she's killing it, and she's impacting people across the globe. And I just want you to maybe take a couple minutes to validate those who aren't in full-time ministry, but are in full-time ministry. Like what would you say to them? Like, because sometimes it's not like we're considered maybe an anomaly, or maybe, oh, that's just what they do, but the pandemic proved otherwise. So like just take some time to validate, encourage those of us who are side hustle pastors, side hustle leaders, co-vocationalists, whatever name we put on it. Like, speak to them a little bit.
Yeah, I would say this, like Peyton Jones, like I love his podcast, his books he's written. I'm a big Peyton Jones fan. I think one thing the church has done is we've bored the apostles, the evangelists, and the prophets, and he talks a little bit about that. And I think a lot of times those are the ones that will go start these nonprofits and these other ministries outside the church. And so if that's you, thank you for being willing to step out and start something new and fresh. We need you. I just think of all the nonprofits and the ministries in Omaha alone. They're doing work that we get to partner with. But just think if the church would actually start equipping and like resourcing some of these nonprofits that are disconnected. And I think the church has missed out a lot on this space that's out there, these new expressions, fresh expressions, that they could have been a better partnership. They could have been more equipped, trained, more kingdom minded, even if we would have just said, hey, I see what God's doing in you. We want to help you and send you out and be alongside you as you do it. So if that's you, if you are, maybe you're sitting in a chair right now in a pew or whatever it may be, and you're just feeling disconnected and discontented, that's okay. God's doing something in you. Find someone that can help you understand what that is, and find someone that's willing to help you understand that calling and even support you and encourage you, maybe even support you as you do it. Because I do believe there's so many fresh expressions that are just sitting in our chairs, sitting in our pews, that are just waiting for someone to say, I see this in you. I see God's doing something in you. But if we don't awaken that, if we don't see that in them and call it out in them, it might go to waste, unfortunately.
You know what, Casey? I'm so glad you said that. Here's why. I thought about this the other day. I said, most nonprofits are the church in action. They just don't know it. And they just see themselves as a nonprofit. I had to sit down with a leader and I said, hey, I know this is your mission, but have you ever thought that, or has it ever come to you that you are the church and that you're doing a missional work that's leading to making disciples? What if you shifted your strategy from just seeing yourself this way to seeing yourself as the church? And it's so sad, like, because that we've allowed, or we've not given permission to, all the things that we see in communities where nonprofit exists, those for the most part could be apostolic, prophetic, like you just said, evangelistic leaders who, where they were, didn't have the space and the encouragement and the support from their leaders to say, go. I hear Jennifer bragging on her bishop, RIP, Bishop Eddie Long. He blessed my life when I was in prison. Wish I would have had a chance to meet him. But you talk a lot about how, like, how God had opened up the door for you to serve in that capacity at New Birth, and how it really stretched you and the people that, like, God used in your life, who actually believed in you. And I think that's what I hear Casey saying, that Crossover Church and people who have come before you have believed in you. And we don't want you to miss that. We want you to see that what Casey just got through saying in terms of advice is, hey, hang around people who love you, hang around people who will encourage you, don't forget to trust the process. Don't rush it. These are things that he's learned in the pandemic. Take the time to understand what God's called you to. Find a tribe. Jennifer, what would you add to this conversation, things that Casey's talking about?
Oh, wow. Especially the, being the bivocational pastor and business person, or, you're working a job. I would say, don't look at that as you're less anointed than somebody who's serving in ministry full time. Because there are those of us, and I, like you said, Myron, I'm always talking about Bishop Long, but I watched him during the week go out and speak to Fortune 500 companies as a productivity coach. Like, a lot of people don't know he had that business. They don't even know that he had an extensive business background working as an executive for Ford Motor Company. Like they just know
Wow.
he's bishop. So they're finding out now that, oh wow, he did this whole productivity coaching, business coaching during the week, sometimes getting off the plane on a Wednesday evening, coming straight into New Birth for a Bible study and being excellent in that realm. And so he always taught us to be to think of ourselves as Renaissance people, and to understand that God can equally anoint you for ministry as much as he anoints you for the marketplace.
You know what, Jen? That's a word, because I don't know about you, Casey, or you, Jen. Like, have you ever hung around people who may say, "But dang, like, you're just a pastor, but like, why are you doing all this other stuff? Why are you starting businesses, or why are you starting organizations, or why are you helping to mobilize and equip and train?" And it dawned on me, even as you said that about Bishop, that every single person has a different level of capacity, you know, a different level of what they can withhold and withstand. And to see, like, I never knew that about, like, I knew that he maybe had some type of business background, knew, and maybe that was the case, but like to know that we all have different capacity. And for us to see ourselves as a renaissance, like a renaissance leader, that really ministered to me. Like, God spoke that to me a couple of years ago, because I was kind of crying about it. I'm like, God, like, am I just supposed to be this old lame pastor that prepares sermons every Sunday? That sounds pretty boring to me. And I just feel like God gave me permission when he's like, nah, you're a renaissance man. Right. And I see Casey as that, and I see you as that, Jen. And speaking of that, Casey, what have you learned about yourself personally as we land the plane? What have you learned about yourself personally that could help every single person who's watching now, or maybe we'll catch this later?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. The first thing is how important it is to have a coach. Like, for me, like, I can sometimes think I know it all or have it all figured out, but I think it's important to have a coach. Like, professional athletes have coaches. Like, we need coaches as well. I'm so thankful for Dwight Nash, who's my church playing coach. Ed Love with the Wesleyan Church, like, he helped me through a lot of things. So having people in your life that can coach you, that have gone before you, even if they don't know the answer, but being okay and willing to, like, hear you out and create space for you to talk things out. And so I think big thing for me is, like, I need coaches, I need people in my life. And especially because I'm like strength finders, I'm a high achiever, very relational, which means I'm not the most strategic. Like, I don't plan things out the best. So I need people around me that can and will. And so once I go back to this a lot, like, knowing how God's made you, how he wired you, is so important, because that, like, not only do you know yourself well, you know what you're not good at either. I just know I'm not very good at the strategic piece of it. Like, my wife hates it. Like, I'll forget to tell her about stuff, and I'll plan stuff in the moment. And I'm just not strategic, and I don't plan things. But I need people that are, and I can, if you want to get stuff done. So I think the last thing I'll close it out with is, it kind of ties into knowing who you are. Knowing who you aren't as well. I don't have to be Pastor Monty, very dynamic speaker, motivational. I don't have to be Pastor Keith. I don't have to be anybody else but me. And if I try to replicate them, or if I try to copy them, it's not authentic. It's not me. It's not who God called me to be. And so giving your permission to be who you are. And obviously we can learn from other people, other pastors, other leaders, and we should, but that doesn't mean how they do it is the way you need to do it. And so be okay with what God's given you, be okay with the gifts and talents that he's provided you with, and use them to the fullest and be a good steward of them. I believe if we try to mimic someone else, we're not being a good steward of what God's given us and who he's called us to be. So I think I had to give myself permission to be okay with that. And so if you're out there and you're struggling with, well, I'm not a good preacher, I'm not an impactful speaker, don't let that hinder you from doing what God's called you to do. Find your voice, find your lane, and allow God to use that.
That we could have a whole nother show just on that piece right there. Knowing who you are and knowing who you're not. Oh, That's a great piece. And I think as leaders, especially in the church, what we tend to do, because we're trying to build a team, we're trying to get people to participate. So we just start grabbing for people, whosoever will. And a lot of times we're placing people in spaces where they're not strong at. And then we wonder why there's not a passion for serving, or they're grumpy. Growing up in the Black church, there's always that one grumpy usher. You hated to see her at the door on a Sunday morning. But, I think one of the things that I'm seeing in this new generation of church leaders, and I don't want to say it's a millennial thing, but it's definitely driven by millennials, is that we are becoming more conscious of strengths and weaknesses, and putting people where they're strong at, where they're passionate at, so that we can provide a better, healthier, and holistic experience for the worshipers and the faith community at large. So I definitely love that. And also too, I wanted to kind of piggyback on a previous point when we were talking about being the Renaissance person. I want to say this: you do yourself a disservice when you don't explore all that God has put in you to bring to this earth. Wayne Dyer has a very powerful quote that I often go back to, and he said, "Do not die with your music still in you." Whatever your music is, explore all the parts of it, all the chords, all the colors, everything about it, and get it all out, because the world needs to know who you are. They need to experience what God gave you. Even if it's just, your neighborhood, somebody needs to experience what God gave you. So I would challenge anybody that's listening to us today to please, please, please explore everything and be all that you can be. And Myron.
Jennifer, you about to make me cry, Jennifer. Jennifer, you about to make me cry. Like, did y'all just hear what she said? Like, don't let the music die in you. And Casey, man, this has been a blessing, bro. Like, one of the things that we wanted to, our hope is that leaders who are watching will be able to relate to your story, will be able to relate to what God is doing. And so we're super thankful for you. I'm going to let Jennifer land the plane and kind of ask you a few questions on how we can get a hold of you. And then for our viewers, we're taking a break next week, but then we're launching a brand new series called Business Made Missional. We're going to piggyback on some things that, Casey has talked about, and then really free you and free your people to be who God has called them to be in and outside the four walls of the church. So I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer.
Very much. So Pastor Casey, let us know where we can find you. What are your service times? There might be somebody in your area that might want to drop by and visit. So let us know we can find you online and in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Come to Omaha anytime. We'd love to have you. Meet at Heritage Elementary at 10 o'clock up in Benton, Nebraska, just outside of Omaha. Definitely reach out anytime. I'd love to talk to anybody that's pursuing church planning, any type of missional work. Casey.com. So I got crossover-church.com. Crossover-church.com is the website. Facebook at Crossover Church NE. Cell phone 605-660-3686. Seriously, give me a call, shoot me a text. Like, I love people that are stepping out and doing something new, something different. If God's doing a work in you, give me a call. I'm probably get a bunch of prank calls now and probably some spam calls, but it's all good. It's worth it. It's kingdom. So I'm just thankful. Myron, Jennifer, thank you so much for this conversation. Something I'm passionate about, and I'm thankful for what you guys are doing and creating this space for us to tell our story.
Yes, and I'm pretty sure the exponential family's going to do well by that phone number. Amen. And let you have peace. But we're so grateful for this conversation. It was insightful. And I know for me as a church leader, I was encouraged, just listening to you and how you held fast to what God had given you and what he had told you and the mission that he had placed you on. And so kudos to you. I definitely feel like anybody that's listening to this, that's looking at church planning and kind of in that in-between stage of should I go or should I not, I think they're going to be highly encouraged and look at you like, okay, well, if Pastor Casey can do it and really embrace it, then this is something I can do too. And so God bless you to you all that have been hanging out with us. We love it. Definitely leave some feedback on the replay, and we'll try to reply to those comments as we see them. And until next time, this is Myron Pierce. Follow him on Instagram at Myron Pierce. You can find me at Jen Janelle on Instagram. Myron's on Instagram. And we also have the Church Next show on Instagram as well. So until next time, you guys, peace.
Peace.